Well, hello everybody. Thought I'd sneak in a quick video before I leave for Expona in Chicago, Illinois. It's a really big audio show for equipment. They also sell vinyl, and this year they're actually going to have a car stereo area as well. So I'm looking forward to spending time this weekend and sharing some of that with you. But today I'm going to do a really short shootout of Fleetwood Mac's Tango in the Night. Now this was reissued recently on Mobile Fidelity 2x45RPM. And we're going to compare that to a couple of others. That's coming up next on the Safe and Sound Texas Audio Excursion. So the reason for this shootout, of course, is the recent release here in 2025 of Mobile Fidelity's 2LP at 45 RPM release of Tango in the Night by Fleetwood Mac. Originally released in 1987, it was a full 5 years after the previous release of Mirage, which was a hit album for them as well. And they were on a string of these, with Lindsey Buckingham and Stevie Nicks having joined the band, because we had the self-titled, we had Rumors, which was huge. We then had Tusk, which was a double LP, which was in my opinion. Then we had Mirage, and now Tango in the Night. And so we're going to be comparing this against 3 other reissues that have come out. Now, the original was cut DMM, or direct metal mastering, which again was kind of in vogue at the time in the later 80s. So we'll be comparing that version with 3 reissues. Let's see how the results come out. The nature of audio comparisons is that the results presented in this video are fully subjective. They are based on my equipment in my listening room using my hearing capability. Therefore, your results may be different. My effort here is to provide you the relative difference of audio characteristics across various pressings. So the USOG first pressing that I have, again, it was a DMM cut. It was pressed at Allied Record Company, and it was mastered by Stephen Marcuson at Precision Lacquer. And that one is a fairly easy one to find for around $20. The reissues involved, first was a Warner 30th anniversary. It was a reissue released in 2017, mastered and lacquer cut by Chris Bellman. It doesn't indicate where it was pressed. It feels like a full 180 gram record, very solid. VMP then did, or Vinyl Me Please, did a release in 2024, last year, and it's a colored vinyl, a greenish color, with mastering and the lacquer cut by Ryan K. Smith at Sterling, and it was pressed at GZ Media. And that one's going for around $60 out there, whereas the Warner 30th is like $18. You can pick it up. And again, the last one here being the reason for the whole shootout, the release of this 2LP 45 RPM record by MOFI. Now, if you didn't see my video a few weeks ago, there actually was an issue with side 1 as far as the EQ sounded very flat and veiled, and they recut the record. And so the original side 1 was a -A5. This corrected one was an A7. So you can check your dead wax on side 1 and confirm it's an A7. That's the corrected one. This was mastered by Krieg Wunderlich, who I hope to meet at Expona. And of course was pressed by Fidelity Record Pressing, which is the plant that Mobile Fidelity has invested in. And it's about a $60 investment. So we have these 3 reissues going against the original. They're all fairly much the same in terms of their relative decibel, although the Warner 30th by Bellman is a tad louder, not quite even a full dB louder than the other 2. So it wasn't too much of a difference on these, but the VMP and the MOFI matched off with the original that I have. As far as the quietness of the vinyl, the original was about an 8, a little bit of surface noise on it. The Warner was a little bit quieter, but still some surface noise at an 8.5. The VMP, however, was noisier than the Warner 30th. It's an 8, just like the original. But the MOFI, very solid, 9.5, very quiet. So if a quiet record is really, really important to you, the MOFI definitely brings home the bacon on that one. As it related to the bass, the original was 8.5. It wasn't overly strong. I think one of the things about the DMM cut on this is a little bit thin. It was clean, but it was a little bit thin. And so I gave it an 8.5, whereas the Chris Bellman 30th was a solid 9.5. Very good bass, very present and engaging on that. Basically, I'm going to talk about this record having more body. It really had some heft to it and some body to it and some warmth to it that was really appreciated when comparing these. The VMP was an 8.5. It wasn't that, it lacked some energy. Overall, the VMP lacked energy. And again, a lot of these are very systemic across the board for these records. The 9 goes to the MOFI. It had a very decent bass, not quite what the 30th had, but very well defined and clean. But it was just a tad thinner on those bottom bass notes, but definitely very clear, precise, but not quite the same emphasis that we had on the 30th with Chris Bellman. The mid-range was pretty much the same in the rating as was the treble. So let's look at these. We had the original being an 8.5. Again, it was a little thin. I don't think it just had the presence that it needed to have. And then the VMP was just lacked energy. I mean, they got 8.5s each. They were different in the way they sounded, but they both, didn't bring it home. And unfortunately, for a variety of reasons that are somewhat different between the two, the OG was more listenable. The VMP just seemed a little messy. I don't know any other way to put it. Just didn't quite sound right. So we gave 8.5s there for the original and the VMP in the mids and the treble, but the 30th again was very well defined here. Very much a decent amount of body in the middle, getting that presence to you and feeling it in your chest, some of the voices, and then the top end, some of the percussion and some of the top end things were definitely a little more spicy, had a little more tingle to them than even the MOFI, which was a 9, both in the mids and the treble. So you can see there, we're basically saying, if you can live with a little bit of the noisier vinyl, you've got a better sounding record with the 30th, but if the vinyl is a big issue to you, the MOFI is going to really be solid for you as well. Unfortunately, it's not always the best of all worlds when it comes to these things. And when it comes to dynamic range, the USOG was a little bit better there, had a little more openness in the amount of range it had from low end to high end, so we gave it a 9. And the Chris Bellman 30th got a 9.5, very, very wide sound stage in that. And the VMP, again, 8.5, not very good. Whereas the MOFI stepped it up a bit. The dynamic range was pretty solid here, on par with the Chris Bellman, which was good to see, because we then get into soundstage and imaging, and it similarly was strong, as was the Chris Bellman there, with the original having a 9 and then that VMP lagging again at an 8.5. Voices were kind of in line with all of this as well, although I'd say that the Chris Bellman, because it had more body, I'd say the voices had a little more emphasis to them than even the MOFI had. I wouldn't call it thin in any way, shape, or form, but it was just a tad thinner. Didn't quite have the same impact, but very sweet sounding voices there on the MOFI, especially with that quiet vinyl. So no slouch when it came to that. So when we bring these all together, you can see that the original was an 8.75, and if you considered the vinyl quietness, it was an 8.64, whereas the Warner was a 9.5 on the Sonics, and if you bring in the vinyl calculation, it was 9.36. The VMP really was the stinker here. 8.5 sonics average, and then the vinyl wasn't as great either, so 8.43. So it had the lowest score. And then coming up pretty close to the 30th was, in fact, the sonics of the MOFI being 9.17. And when you consider the vinyl, 9.21. So pretty close to that 9.36. Now, if you look at the cost factor here, your best bang for your buck, of course, is that Warner 30th. Because you can get those. I saw one with a near mint on Discogs for $18, and several others that were just a few dollars more. So that one definitely, if you're looking for a cheaper record to get and has really good sonics, that's it. If you want to get away from something where the vinyl maybe is a little noisier than you like, man, the MOFI sounds really nice. The correction that was made on that second release of that first side, that they really cleared up and cleaned up the problem and sent those out in fairly short order. So kudos to Mobile Fidelity for getting that done and living up to the word and the promise of it being good, because it was very, very good. But again, you have a cost component there to consider where it is in fact more expensive. But it's a solid piece of work, definitely one worth having in your collection if you like this album. I want to give a special thanks to my friend Brad, who provided me the material for this, actually. I had an original of Tango. He had the other ones, the 30th, the VMP, and the MOFI. And he was nice enough to also have that album of LP1 sent to me with the correction so that I could do the shootout and get the comparison completed. So as always, thanks, Brad, for your assistance. So this one has a winner in a surprise fashion in a way, where that 30th anniversary, rather inexpensive one by Chris Bellman, really is strong. The VMP was a bit disappointing, actually. I can't say why. I know it's on colored vinyl. I don't want to necessarily say that was it in and of itself, whether the source was different, but it definitely was not one that I would say was pleasing to the ears, especially when you look at the fact they're going for $60 still. So I would say seek out that 30th, or go for the MOFI, of course, which is really a nice clean record, very, very quiet and pleasurable to listen to. If you're averse to 45 RPMs with 2 LPs, of course, again, that 30th anniversary at 33 RPM on 1 LP is a great value, and you might want to seek it out. The OG, it was fine. It was fine for sure, but it really didn't have the body that Chris Bellman 30th had. It really had some nice weight to it, really had some good feeling to it, good feedback, and really a nice way to introduce some of the different kind of sounds that were in this particular record by Fleetwood Mac. So there you have it. I hope you've enjoyed this and were able to learn something from it. And tell me what you think in the comments below, as always. And if you haven't subscribed, please consider doing so by clicking on the bell below. And a thumbs up or like is appreciated, as always. Again, comments are a way I really love to interact with you. So I'm headed to Chicago to Expona. I'll be showing you what's going on there, and we'll be ready for some more shootouts next week. So thanks again for joining us here at the Safe and Sound Texas Audio Excursion. Take care, everybody.